Do you want to make beef back ribs so tender your friends will be begging you for the recipe? If you ever struggle with tough ribs or wondered how to smoke them perfectly, you're in the right place. Stay tuned because I'm about to show you step by step how to smoke beef back ribs to perfection. Let's start by getting your beef back ribs ready for the smoker. First, we're going to trim off any excess fat. When it comes to beef back ribs, you want to leave a little fat on, but don't go overboard. A good amount of fat is important because it helps keep the ribs juicy during the long smoking process. But too much fat can cause flare ups in the smoker, which can char your meat and leave your ribs overly greasy, which nobody wants. Look for ribs that have a nice layer of fat on top. You don't want it to be too thick, but a little fat cap will melt during the smoking process and infuse the meat with flavor. The key is balance. You're looking for a good even layer, not huge chunks of fat hanging off the ribs. And if there are any parts with a lot of fat, trim it back so you don't have too much on the surface. Remember, you can always remove fat, but you can't really add it back. So it's best to go a little lighter on trimming than to go too heavy and end up with a dry and tough rib. Let's talk seasoning. If you want beef back ribs that taste amazing, seasoning is key. I like to keep it simple. A good all-purpose barbecue rub works wonders, but you can get creative. A blend of salt, black pepper, garlic powder, and paprika gives a great base. You can even add a little cayenne pepper for some heat. And I recommend letting the seasoning sit on the ribs for at least 15 to 30 minutes before smoking. This gives the flavors time to soak in. Alright, now it's time to get these bad boys onto the smoker. Set up your smoker for 225 degrees Fahrenheit for that low and slow cooking method. That'll make the ribs melt in your mouth. Place your ribs bullseye down on the smoker grate. This helps protect the meat and prevents them from drying out. But here's where things get a little interesting. After about 2 hours of smoking, we're going to wrap the ribs in foil. The foil wrap technique is what's called the Texas crunch. It's a simple but effective way to lock in moisture and accelerate the cooking process. So after about 2 hours of smoking at 225 degrees Fahrenheit, you'll want to wrap the beef back ribs tightly in heavy-duty aluminum foil. This will trap the steam inside, helping the ribs stay moist and tender as they cook. You want to make sure that the ribs are snug in the foil. Once the ribs are wrapped, put them back in the smoker for another 2 hours. The foil will help the ribs become super tender. But it's not just about cooking. This is also when the flavors deepen and really come together. And the result? You're gonna have ribs that are incredibly tender, juicy, and ready for that final glaze. And if you're new to backyard barbecue and want a little extra help with cooking times and temperatures, I've got a free guide that'll make things super easy for you. It covers everything from meats to veggies, and it's perfect for getting started. Just drop a 100 in the comments below and I'll send it your way. Now let's take it up a notch with a homemade Dr. Pepper sauce. It adds a sweet and tangy flavor that really complements the smoky beef. To make the glaze, we're going to use Dr. Pepper as the base. Pour in a can into a saucepan and bring it to a simmer. You're going to add some ketchup, brown sugar, apple cider vinegar, Worcestershire sauce, garlic powder, and some onion powder. Let the sauce simmer for about 20 to 30 minutes and then stir it occasionally. The Dr. Pepper will reduce down and the flavors will really meld together. Once the glaze is ready, we'll brush it on the ribs, about 10 minutes before the ribs are done smoking. Alright, we're almost there. Let's talk about how long to smoke them. To get these beef back ribs nice and tender, you'll want to smoke them at 225 degrees Fahrenheit for about 5 hours. This low and slow cooking method really helps break down all the tough bits while keeping all that flavor locked in. But it's not just about the clock. The key is checking in for the tenderness. One way to do that is the bend test. Grab a pair of tongs and lift the ribs a bit. If they bend and start cracking, showing that the meat is pulling away from the bones, you're on the right track. You can also use a meat thermometer. Once you hit an internal temperature of about 190 degrees to 203 degrees Fahrenheit, you're golden. Now here's a quick tip. I like to keep a close eye on the temperature so I know exactly when they're done. Once you hit that range, it's time to get them ready for the glaze. While these ribs finish cooking, let's talk about the difference between beef back ribs and short ribs. The two cuts might seem similar, but they have key differences. Beef back ribs come from the upper part of the rib cage, near the ribeye steak section, just below the spine. These ribs have less marbling when most of the meat between the bones rather than on top. While leaner, they still have great flavor, especially when smoked low and slow. You often see these referred to as shiners because the bones come through while they're cooking. They're also the type of beef ribs that you'll commonly find at barbecue restaurants. Now, short ribs, on the other hand, come from the lower rib cage. They're closer to the belly. They are well marbled with fat, making them incredibly tender and juicy when slow cooked or braised. They're usually cut into thick, meaty slabs, sometimes with a bit of brisket meat attached. Here's where things get tricky. Many restaurant dishes labeled as short ribs, like short rib risotto, actually use meat from the chuck or the shoulder rather than the ribs. While it shares a similar texture, it's technically not from the rib section. So to sum it up, beef back ribs are leaner and come from the upper rib cage, while short ribs come from the lower rib area and are known for their fat content, which makes them extra tender when cooked right. Both are delicious in their own way, but they do have their differences in terms of meatiness and tenderness. Now, what wood is best for smoking beef back ribs? The wood you use will greatly affect the flavor, so it's worth paying attention to. I personally love oak or hickory for that bold, smoky flavor. If you want something a little sweeter, try fruit woods like apple or cherry. Be sure to use seasoned wood, not green wood. This ensures that you get that clean, smoky flavor without any bitterness. And now it's time for the finishing touch. Once your ribs are smoking and close to being done, let's add that Dr. Pepper barbecue glaze. I like to brush on the glaze when the ribs are about 15 minutes from being done. This gives the sauce enough time to set without burning it. After glazing, you want to let the ribs smoke a bit more so that the sauce caramelizes and gives you that perfect sticky finish. Once the ribs are done, let them rest for about 10 minutes before slicing. This allows the juices to redistribute and gives you the best bite. Slice between the bones to get that perfect portion. You'll see how juicy and tender the ribs are. How do you like your ribs? Let me know in the comments if you prefer your ribs with or without sauce. Alright, now you know how to cook those amazing beef back ribs. But here's the thing, there's one more trick up my sleeve. If you really want to take your rib game up a notch, you gotta see how I cook them on the pit barrel cooker. Go ahead and click on the next video right here, and I'll show you how to make ribs that'll blow your mind. See you there.